Good morning, Rockharbor. It's great to see you guys. You doing well? Yeah, not too bad. You're looking good. You're enjoying the summer. If you are new with us, maybe the past couple of months, you might not know who I am. My name is Doug Connolly, and I'll be your motivational speaker today. So we're so glad you're here. I'm going to kind of tell you who I am in a second. But this is kind of a really exciting day for me. And kind of a sad day for me. This is probably the last time I'll be speaking here, for at least for a while. And depending how good I do, I might not get invited back. So we'll see what happens. But it really is. It's exciting and sad at the same time. And it's been a crazy 4.5 years. Do you guys believe in miracles? I believe in miracles, and I've lived several miracles. The first miracle is that Jesus saved me. Another miracle is that I somehow landed a beautiful woman as my wife. I mean, just look at this, right? Another miracle is the adoption of our children in a miracle birth that we weren't expecting. And then another miracle is being part of Rockharbor Church and to see what God has done and what he's doing and to be able to experience and just play a little bit of a role in what God has done here. That's a miracle. That God would take a couple knuckleheads, mainly Keith, but a couple knuckleheads, he calls us jackwagons, and he would add a few other knuckleheads and a bunch of real people together and use us to make an impact for his kingdom. And as I was preparing this week a little bit, it just kind of really hit me a little bit, and to think, just to be able to celebrate and remember what God has done the past 4.5 years, and just thank him. Thank him for allowing me to be part of it. And then be part of this next movement, which is starting Stonehill Church. In just a few weeks, we're starting August 28th. It's going to be crazy and what God is doing. And I want to just really remind us today, Rockharbor, to not take this lightly. This is not normal for a church to launch out a church, send finances and several hundred people to go 6.5 miles away to plant a church to reach the other side of town. And I am just so blown away and humbled that God is doing this as a church. And I want to make sure that we understand this morning that what Keith is doing, what our elders are doing, what you are doing as a church, that it really sinks in, that you really understand what is happening and be thankful for it. So what I'd like to do this morning, just for a second, is just celebrate Keith, celebrate our elders and our leadership, and thank them for being so open-handed. Can we do that together? Yeah. It's like a party up in here. Yeah. Oh, man. And as we talk about this morning, before we get into John chapter 18, I want us to just really understand why we're doing this. What the purpose is, what our mission is as a church, is to love and to lead one another, to be devoted followers of Jesus. And so what we have on our website, the Stonehill website, is there's a place where people, if they want to get information, be put on the information list, then get emails. And so this lady a couple weeks ago went on there and she put her information. I responded back to her with an email, and I just asked her if I could answer any questions for her. I introduced myself, and I wanted to read to you her response to me after I wrote this email, because I think it's really important for us to remind ourselves what our purpose is and what we're trying to accomplish, okay? So this is what she says. She says, Doug, I've heard about Rockharbor, and I have some friends that attend there, but we live on the other side of town. I would love to get involved in the new church, and I'm so excited to see such an amazing church come over this way to us. Now, that's pretty cool in itself, and what is awesome about that is that Rockharbor has a great reputation around the city that people want to be part of it, even if they don't live close to it, okay? That's pretty cool. But here's the really cool part. This is the part that I want us to all get this morning. She says this: I have never been directly involved with a church group or a church family, or have really attended church. So all of this will be new to me, but I'm so excited to have the ability to start one from the ground up. Please let me know what I can do to help or where I can be involved. Thank you so much. And that's what it's all about. Isn't that awesome? So cool. I mean, someone who doesn't even know Jesus probably has never been to church before, and she wants to be part of it. Why? Because you as a church, Rockharbor, you're already shining the light, and you have open hands. And I know this is a hard process for some of us. I mean, it's a bittersweet thing for me, because some of you, I love all of you dearly, but I'm really close to so many of you, and I won't get to see you every Sunday. Some of you know people that are going to Stonehill that you won't get to see every Sunday. But you know what? You get it. You understand this isn't a country club, but we're all about the mission of Jesus. And so if you want to turn to John chapter 18 this morning, this isn't, to me, it's a God-ordained passage of Scripture because I read it this week and I started studying it and God began to blow my mind on a few things that I never even knew that was in there. And I hope that he does the same thing for you this morning to see what he has done in his mission, what Jesus' mission is and was on this earth. And so what happens is I think we're going to learn and we're going to see a truth that Jesus is going to claim that sometimes it can sound to us, especially if you're newer to church, it can kind of sound too good to be true. Have you guys ever experienced something in life that just seems to be too good to be true, whether it's on TV or something? I tell my kids all the time, guys, listen, if it seems too good to be true, it probably is too good to be true. And so they do this all the time on TV. They sell products. How many of you guys remember the Thigh Master? Anybody? All right. You're laughing because you probably bought one. How many of you have one in your garage still sitting there, right? It debuted in 1998 with Suzanne Summers, all right? It was amazing. If you want to have rock hard thighs, this is the equipment that you buy. All you got to do is put it between your knees and squeeze, okay? That's what you do with the Thigh Master. If maybe working out isn't your thing and you've heard the truth, what about this? Nutrition. Now, a couple months ago, I tried this, and it worked a little bit, but have you guys ever experienced the Nutri-System? But not just the Nutri-System where you buy the frozen meals. I'm talking about the good stuff where you buy it in a box, all right? Because who doesn't want to eat a week's full of meals out of a box? I mean, this is good stuff. And you can lose between 10 pounds and 5 inches in 1 month. And Marie Osmond, check this out. She lost 50 pounds, all right? This is amazing, all right? So it's the truth. If maybe working out isn't your thing, nutrition isn't your thing, maybe GLH.
GLH means great-looking hair. Just spray GLH on and it instantly covers your bald spot, leaving you with great-looking hair. And ladies with thinning hair or bald spots, GLH solves the problem instantly.
I'll tell you what, I can't believe it. You know, I've seen the commercial, and I just couldn't believe it. And it really looks great. My wife's got herself a new guy now, and I tell you, I'm really impressed.
That's incredible. I've been getting harassing for being bald. I'm only a young man. No more dates without being called old man, but the babes are back.
Yeah, the babes are back. Yeah. So I saw this. I actually ordered a bottle for Keith and Nate, just because that's the type of friend that I am. But we experience in life these different truths, these different claims. And so what I want us to get here this morning, as we look through John chapter 18, that Jesus makes a claim that I'm sure if you've been to church before, you've heard it. But it almost can seem too good to be true if you're not part of church or you don't know about Christianity. But it's so important for us. So we're going to see the greatest claim, the greatest problem, and the greatest solution this morning. So we look at John chapter 18, and John, Elliott, and Keith have done a great job in the past couple weeks as we began the study of the man's mission. But let's pick it up in verse 1 of John chapter 18. It says, when Jesus had spoken these words, he went out with his disciples across the brook Kidron, where there was a garden which he and his disciples entered. Now, let me kind of give you the preface here. So Jesus and his disciples are in the upper room, and they've spent hours and hours. John has taken several chapters to tell us what's going on. But then they're done, and they decide to leave, and they get up in the middle of the night or towards the nighttime, and they begin walking through the streets of Jerusalem to the south part as they begin walking up this valley called Kidron up into this garden. Now, here it doesn't tell us what the garden's name is, but in other parts of the Bible, other Gospels, it tells us it's the Garden of Gethsemane. Now, what's interesting in gardens during this time is throughout the city, they usually didn't have gardens in the city. They had them outside the city walls. And usually it was the more affluent people that had the gardens that were closer to the city. And so many people think that Jesus was friends with the owner of this garden because he spent so much time there. He spent the night there often. It was a place of solace for him. And so what happens in verse 2? Now, Judas, who betrayed him, also knew the place where Jesus often met there with his disciples. So Judas, having procured a band of soldiers, now remember that, a band of soldiers, we'll talk about that in a minute, and some officers from the chief priest and the Pharisees went there with lanterns and torches and weapons. Now, as we continue on this morning, I want to show you some things of the next few verses that can almost seem too good to be true. And the first thought is this, is the greatest claim ever. As Jesus is standing there in front of these men, he says something that at that time would have blown their minds, that either would have made them really mad or excited them. So what does he say? Verse 4. Then Jesus, knowing all that would happen to him, he came forward and said to them, he says to them, whom do you seek? And these men answered, and they said, Jesus of Nazareth. And then Jesus said to them, I am he. So Judas, who betrayed him, was standing with him. Now, what I want us to understand this morning is these three words, I am he, are astonishing. They're crazy. And if you take it back to the Greek, there's actually only two words. The words I am are there because we've added the word he because of our English translation. So in essence, what Jesus is telling them, what they're hearing is this, I am. Now, why is this such a big deal? As you look throughout the Bible, and even in John, Jesus made several claims. 7 times he said, I am the door, or I am the true vine, or I am the way, the life everlasting. He says 7 times, he says, I am, but then we get to this part kind of towards the end of the book, and he just simply says, I am. Now, as you look at the rest of the Bible in the Old Testament, we see in Exodus chapter 3, Moses is talking to God through the burning bush. And Moses says, God, who am I supposed to tell Pharaoh that's sending me? And what does God say? He says, tell Pharaoh that I am sent you. In John chapter 8, Jesus is talking to the Pharisees, and they're kind of debating about Abraham and how great he is and how Jesus needs to listen to him. And Jesus makes this statement to the Pharisees again, and he says, before Abraham existed, Jesus said, I am. When Jesus says these two words, I am, he is claiming divinity. And he is saying, look, you guys have to understand, I am God. So although we hear the words, I am he, what he is saying and what those Jewish leaders there are hearing is him saying, look, guys, I am divine. Now, it's interesting. When God says, I am, it says a lot. Now, when we say it, we'll say it like this. We'll say, I am this, or I am that. I am because, or we'll say, I am smart, or I am a Cowboys fan, so I'm not very smart, right? Can I get an amen? Someone. It's funny, Keith's not even here, but he's listening on the video. But God, when he says it, he never says, I am because. He doesn't say, I am this or I am that. God is saying, look, I don't depend on anyone or anything. I control everything. I sustain everything. I am everything. And God is saying, Jesus, who is God, says this, I am all. Now, what I want us to understand here this morning, and we have people all from different backgrounds. We have people who have gone to church their whole lives. We have people that maybe the first time at church this morning. When God makes this statement, he is saying something entirely different than any other major religious leader has ever said before. Okay, you got to get this. He's saying the opposite of what they have said. See, most religious leaders will say this, I will show you the way, I will tell you the way. But Jesus says, no, you don't get it. He says, I am the way. He says, I won't show you the way to God. Jesus says, I am God and I've come to find you. Jesus is claiming divinity. And so for us, I think as we hear this morning, it's really important for us to understand this, that we have to either believe who Jesus says he is, or really, the other opposite extreme is believe that he's some kind of nut job, some wacko, to say the things that he's saying. And when we hear this claim, the greatest claim ever made in history, I think we have kind of 3 options this morning. The first option is this, that we believe his claim. And if we believe his claim, man, we surrender. We fall on our knees and we surrender to him and we say, Lord, take control of my entire life. If you don't believe Jesus' claim and you think that he is not right, then really what you need to do is get as far away from him as possible. And Jesus doesn't obviously like that. The third option is this. Maybe you're neutral for a time. Maybe you're searching, you're here, and you're trying to figure out what Christianity is all about. You're trying to figure out, is this Bible real? Is God real? And for a time, I believe it's okay to search and pray, but there's going to come a point in your life where God, the Holy Spirit, is going to come, and he's going to want you to make a decision. I can tell you the thought or the person that has no integrity at all is the person or the thought that says, look, I believe some of what Jesus says. Every once in a while I'll pray to him if I need something. But really you come with a kind of a mild and lackadaisical attitude. But see, when we truly see who Jesus is and we believe it, that should change our entire life. And as God proclaims this, Jesus never made a claim that was too good to be true. Never. So that's the greatest claim. Here's the next thought, though, is the greatest problem. The greatest problem. So we go on to verse 3, and it talks about the band of soldiers. Remember I said Judas procured a band of soldiers. And what is interesting as you look back, and I didn't get this until I studied this, so this is really interesting. When you look at the word band of soldiers, some versions say detachment, and you look back at the Greek, it comes from a word called spira, which is a cohort or a tenth of a Roman legion. Now get this for a second. A Roman legion is 6,000 Roman soldiers, so a tenth of that would be 600 people. So I want you to visualize, put yourself at this time and feel what's happening. There are 600 Roman trained soldiers, along with probably, scholars think, a couple hundred Jewish police and leaders. So somewhere between 800 to 1,000 men with torches and lanterns and swords and clubs. Now picture this with me. This is nighttime. It's full moon because it's Passover. These men are walking through the streets of Jerusalem, and as they begin to go through the valley of Kidron, they begin walking and going up. And we remember Jesus is in the Garden of Gethsemane. What is he doing? He's up there praying, and the disciples are sleeping. They're napping away, okay? And so Jesus is up there, and you know he sees them coming. And you know he knows why they're there. Now, this is what I want you to get. He could have run away. He could have got out of Dodge, man. He could have said, hey, guys, we got to get out of here, and gone the other way. But he didn't. And what I think is really interesting is John, throughout the entire book, is focusing on the glory of God. And what he's saying is that Jesus here is actually in charge. He's not a victim. He's a victor. And he chooses to stay there to go through this problem. So what happens? This is what blows my mind, okay? So verse 6. It says, when Jesus said to them, okay, so remember, he said, who are you looking for? They said, Jesus of Nazareth. He said, I am he. And then when he says, I am he, they drew back and they fell to the ground. Imagine this with me for a moment. Hundreds and hundreds of trained Roman soldiers who were men. This mild and this meek carpenter says two words. He says, I am. And they don't just step back. They literally fall down before Jesus. Now, why is this such a big deal? As you study throughout the entire Bible, whenever the glory of God is revealed, like God just reveals himself in his full glory, men cannot keep their footing. They fall. You look at 2 Chronicles chapter 5, and they're dedicating the temple. And it tells us that the glory of God filled the place. And it said that the ministers there, they fell to their faces, and they couldn't even minister any longer. In Ezekiel chapter 1, it tells us that Ezekiel saw the glory of God, and he fell prostrate to God. In Luke chapter 5, you remember the story where Peter is out there fishing with the disciples, and they can't catch anything, and all of a sudden Jesus does the miracle, and they bring all this fish onto the boat, and then all of a sudden Peter realizes who Jesus is, and what does he say? He says, depart from me, Jesus, because I'm a sinful man. And what does he do? He falls to the ground. And when someone sees or experiences the glory of God, they cannot continue to stand. You see, anytime as human beings we experience something bigger than us, like right now, if a 300-ton boulder fell through the roof and hit the stage, I would not be able to stand. If I'm in the water and a current comes and grabs me, it's greater than what I can handle, man, I'm going to fall, right? This happens in human terms. Like when we get around people that are stronger than us, that are smarter than us, that are better looking than us, happens to me all the time, okay? What happens here is that we feel insignificant. It's difficult. This happens to Keith and I when we go to the gym. We've been working out the past few months. I know you can't tell, but we've been doing this for the past few months. And we've been throwing some iron around. I mean, we're getting our gains on. We're getting swole. I guess that's what the kids say these days, okay? And so it's crazy. It's so embarrassing. When you go to the gym with Keith, he's a grunter. You guys know what I'm talking about? Oh, my goodness. Like, "Whoa!" And I'm like, come on, Keith. And sometimes he's trying to get all spiritual. He's like, oh, Jesus saves. And I'm like, come on, dude, you're embarrassing me. So tough. But, we'll be there in the gym. We'll be working out. We got, our 5 or 10 pound dumbbells, Why are you laughing? And so all of a sudden, She-Hulk or Andre the Giant, they come sit next to us, and they're just throwing some weight around. That's pretty discouraging, all right? When we first started, the guy we were working with, Jason, he wanted us to do push-ups, so we're down there by ourselves, and he leaves, and so we're down on the main floor, and we're trying to do push-ups. We did 3 of them. I'm not kidding you. We had to go upstairs to the upper room where nobody was at so we could do the girl push-ups. It was embarrassing. Here's what's really bad is, so the first few days we're there, and they have this machine. It's called a dip machine or something. You guys know what I'm talking about? You do dips. And I guess it works your tricepial muscles or something like that. I don't know. Anyways, so we're doing them, and we're using them and feeling pretty good about ourselves. A couple of people kind of walk by us and looking at us, and Keith's like, why are they looking at us? And I'm like, I don't know, maybe they're jealous or something. So we're doing it. We're doing, the workout, and we're done. We come back a couple days later and realize we're doing the whole thing entirely wrong. I guess you're supposed to put your knees on it. We're like literally sitting on it like a seat and doing it. So we need some help still. But here's the deal. If it's that bad, and it's bad, when it's compare ourselves to human glory, what is it going to be like when we stand before God on Judgment Day in all His glory? And we look at Him, and we try to measure up to God's standards. What do? And that's the problem. And in our own accord, we can't do anything. And then you look at Peter. Peter's crazy. That dude's always doing some crazy stuff. He always makes me feel good about myself. And so what happens? Verse 10, Jesus just says, I am, and these hundreds of men fall to the ground. And what does Peter do? He's like, yeah! And so verse 10, he's like, then Simon Peter, having a sword, he drew it, and he struck the high priest's servant and cut off his right ear. Now, this is crazy. I mean, you picture this out. Jesus is like, I am. They go, blah. And Peter's like, yeah! So he runs out, and because he's a fisherman, he's like, ah! And he tries to cut the dude's neck off, and he hits his ear. And Jesus is like, oh my gosh, Peter, this is so embarrassing. I'm surprised at that point Jesus didn't say, okay, never mind, take this guy instead, right? But he doesn't. And Jesus, takes it and heals the man's ear. Now here's what I want us to get for a second. Just envision this. Peter's been walking with Jesus for years and talking about being free, having freedom. And Peter and all the disciples are like, yeah, we don't like the Romans either. We're going to take them. And all of a sudden, it's time. And they come at him. And Jesus just is like, I am, boom. And Peter's excited. He's like, 600 against 1, we can do it. And he runs in there, and then Jesus is like, whoa, no, Peter, that's not what we're doing. Can you imagine what Peter's feeling at this time? And as you read the rest of the chapter, which we had time for today, we don't, but Jesus is taken away, and he's put on trial. And Peter comes along, and he's standing outside in the courtyard as Jesus is being on trial with Annas and Caiaphas. And then what happens? I don't have time to read it all, but in verse 17, a servant girl asks Peter, aren't you with Jesus? And what does he do? He says, I am not. That's the first denial. And then verse 25, 26, and 27, he's asked 2 more times. He's like, aren't you with Jesus? Aren't you with that guy? Aren't you the guy that cut off that guy's ear? And Peter's like, no, I'm not. And then what happens? The rooster crows. What happens? I mean, just a few hours before this guy is on fire. He's ready to go. He's ready to take his life for Jesus. He doesn't care. A few hours later, he's like, are you with Jesus? No, I'm not. I don't know what you're talking about. I think some of us have experienced that before. There's been a point in your life where you've been on fire. You found Jesus. You found hope. And you were so ready to go. You're like, let's take it. Come on, Jesus. We can do this together. And you're so excited. And then the issues of life come into play. And maybe your finances are tight. You're like, okay, Jesus, I've given my life to you. Come on, take care of this. And you wait and nothing happens. You're like, Jesus, where are you at? Maybe it's your health. God, take this illness away from me. Make me feel better. And there's nothing. And what you think should happen is not happening. And this is where we find Peter. Man. His life is being flipped upside down. What he's given his life for is not happening. And we find him at the lowest point of his life, denying the one who's given him life. Maybe you've experienced that before. Maybe you're there right now. God, where are you at? But God. But God. You see, we see the greatest claim, we see the greatest problem, but then we see the greatest solution. The greatest solution. So what I want to do is kind of go back for a second. We kind of skipped a few verses, 7, 8, 9, and I want us to pick this up because honestly, when I read this, I was like, wow, God, this is such a beautiful picture about what you're about ready to do on the cross. So follow me, verse 7. So he asked them again. Remember, Jesus asked them, who are you looking for? They said, Jesus of Nazareth. He said, I am he. And then he comes back and asked them again. He said, whom do you seek? And they said again, Jesus of Nazareth. He's kind of clarifying here. In verse 8, Jesus answered, he said, I told you that I am he. So, if you seek me, let these men go. I want you to get this. These soldiers are there. The Jewish leaders are there. They're ready to arrest everyone. Yes, they're there for Jesus, but they're also there for any of his followers because they got to nip this thing in the bud. And Jesus is stepping in. He said, look, you're here for me. You've said it 2 times, so let these men go. And if they would have taken these men at this point, they probably would have went to jail. And these are the men that literally started the church through the Holy Spirit's power. But Jesus, he steps in. He steps in and he says, let them go, forgive them, and take me. Let me be the substitution for them. See, Jesus here takes on the entire punishment, not only for the disciples here, but it's a precursor to what he's going to do on the cross when he takes your sin and my sin and our issues and our struggles, and he bears that weight upon himself. That's what kind of leader Jesus is. And maybe you know that, and man, you need to hear that this morning. Because I don't know what you're going through, but I guarantee you in a group this size, there are people that are struggling. You're struggling with different things in your life, and ultimately you might be struggling with your faith, and you have to remember that Jesus loves you. There's a gentleman by the name of Sergeant William Swinson, and he is a captain in the Army, and he was awarded the Congressional Medal of Honor. He was the first one to receive it since the Vietnam War. And so the reason why he was awarded it was in 2009. He was in Afghanistan. He was leading these troops. And what they were doing is they were taking some of the Afghanistan leaders to some of the Afghanistan tribal leaders to kind of make peace. And so as they're traveling down this way to get to these tribal leaders, there's about 106 men, and they go into this valley. And all of a sudden, there are about 60 Taliban troops who are up on the hillside, and they begin shooting at these men. Captain Swinson, he's in the back of the barricade there, and he's looking forward, and he sees his men begin to be fired upon and shot at, and some of them are taking fire. And specifically, one of his friends was a sergeant, took a shot in his neck. So Captain Swinson, he runs to him and he grabs him and he pulls out this orange kind of fabric, this panel, what they call a panel marker, and he lays down on the ground and he puts it on top of him and he calls the medevac helicopter to come in. And the medevac helicopter comes in, finds him, and as he does this, the medevac helicopter, they are able to find him because of this marker, but he's also a bigger target for the troops. The helicopter gets there. He jumps up and he takes the sergeant and he takes him to the helicopter, not knowing whether his sergeant is going to live or he'll ever see him again. And he puts him in the helicopter in the middle of the fight with shots going all around him. He bends down and he kisses this man on the forehead. The helicopter leaves and Captain Swenson, he runs back out and he spends the next several hours trying to save some of his men that are lost, that are shot, and they're hurt. And as I heard this story, I thought, man, this is a beautiful picture of what Jesus did for us. He was willing to go first so that you and I, with all of our issues and our problems, we're real stinking people with messy lives. He went first for us so we could be saved. He said, look, guys, take me. Let them go. And he did this, and it's a beautiful picture. It just blew my mind, a beautiful picture about what Jesus is about ready to do on the cross when he gives his life for everyone, for you and I. So that when those of us who give our lives to Jesus and we surrender to him, remember we have to make a choice. We give our lives to Jesus, that when we stand before God in the judgment, we don't have to lose our footing. We can still stand. And here's what I want us to understand this morning, is that if we can stand before a holy and a righteous and a just and a perfect God when we're judged, we can stand now in this life when things get hard. When finances are difficult, when our health is rough, when there's people at our work that are making life hard for us, when our children go astray, no matter what comes along, when we put our faith and trust in Jesus, our own Captain Swenson, who died for us, we can stand now. And that's what our mission is, church. Rockharbor Church. That's what your mission is. That's what our mission is. As we start this new church, Stonehill Church, that's what our mission is. To seek and save those who are lost, to give them hope and light. I want to read you a little story here. It's about a man, and he falls into a pit, okay? As he falls into the pit, he can't get himself out, and all of a sudden these different people come by to see him. First of all, there was a subjective person who walks by, and he looks down into this man in the pit, and he says, you know, I feel for you down in there, in that pit. I feel for you. Then all of a sudden, a Pharisee, he comes along, and he says, you know what? Sorry, only bad people fall into pits. Then a newspaper reporter comes along and wants an exclusive story on the guy in the pit. Then a fundamentalist comes along and says, you know what? You deserve your pit. And then Confucius comes along and he says, you know, if you'd listened to me, you wouldn't have fallen into that pit. Buddha says, you know what? A pit is only a state of mind. A realist comes along and says, you know what? That's a pit. The tax man comes along and he's trying to figure out whether the guy's paying taxes on the pit. The council inspector asks if he had a permit to dig in the pit. An invasive person comes along and totally evades the pit altogether. A self-pitying person comes along and says, you know what? You've not seen anything until you've seen my pit. A charismatic person says, look, just confess that you're not in the pit. An optimist says, you know what? Things could get worse. A pessimist says, you know what? Things are going to get worse. But Jesus, seeing the man in the pit, he bends down and he reaches out and he grabs the man and he pulls him out of the pit. Church, Rockharbor, that was Jesus' mission, is to come to give us life. Life eternally, but let me make it really clear, not only life eternally, but life now, here on this earth. That we can experience life and experience his joy in Jesus. That's our mission. That's our mission as a church. to go to a dying and lost world who need hope, to go down and reach down into the pit, pull people out that need that hope so they can see the true light of Jesus and the hope that only he can provide. That's a question for us today. It's pretty simple, is kind of where you at? Just a beautiful picture of the gospel. The claim of Jesus, the problem that we're in. Romans 3:23 says, for all have sinned. Romans 6:23 says, for the wages of sin is death, but the gift of God is eternal life. And through Jesus, when we commit our life to him, we surrender to him, we can experience that life eternally and now. So my question is for you, first of all, for those of you, maybe you're newer to church, you've been to church for a while, have you ever surrendered your life to Jesus? And maybe that's what you need to do this morning, is surrender your life to him for the first time. You've never done it before. And you give yourself into him. You believe his claims are true. Maybe for the rest of us, you're kind of just in life and you're in problems and you have issues, and you have to just be reminded that Jesus loves you and he gave his life for you. In return, we give him our love. So in a moment, we're going to receive communion together, and it's a perfect time for us to remember what Jesus did for us on the cross. When we receive the bread and the juice, the bread represents the body of Jesus that was broken for us. The juice represents the blood that he shed for us. We take it. As we take it, we remember what he did for us, and we thank him, and we celebrate what he did. We also celebrate him coming back for us someday. The Bible tells us as we receive communion that we don't take it lightly, that it's something that's pretty serious as we remember what he did for us. That if there's any sin in our life that's unconfessed, it's a time for us to confess that sin, to make sure that our heart is right. And the other thing the Bible tells us for is that communion is for those that are Christians, that are believers. And so maybe you're not a believer here this morning, but you want to be a believer. And so what we're going to do here in just a moment, as the keys play, you can just take a moment, you can just pray there right in your seat. Maybe if you want to give your life to Jesus, all you got to do is pray to him and confess your sins to him. Say, Lord, I'm a sinner. Please forgive me of my sin and come into my heart and make me new. And that's something that you give your life to him. You surrender to him. Maybe you just need to take a moment in your seat and just have a time of prayer as a believer, thanking him for what he has done. So with everybody's heads bowed and eyes closed, if you just for a moment, they're going to play the instruments before we pass out the elements. We're just going to take about 30 seconds or a minute to have a quiet time between you and God, and then Nate will start singing. When Nate starts singing, we'll pass out the elements. There's 2 cups stacked together. Grab both of those cups, and then you can take the communion, the elements at any point during the song.